This is the third of 8 short video revision sessions for the theory paper, which will help you with your mock on the afternoon of Friday the 2nd of February 2018 and your real exam on the morning of Monday the 18th of June 2018. This is the first video that covers recruitment, training and rewards, and covers specifically vacancies, job descriptions and person specifications, methods of recruitment, internally or externally, where to advertise the job, application forms and CVs, shortlisting, interviews, and contracts of employment. So, vacancies. A vacancy occurs when someone leaves their job, and this can happen for a number of reasons. Pause the video and try to list the 6 reasons for vacancies that we've covered in class. So the 6 reasons could be: a business expands or has new orders and therefore has some vacancies to fill. Maybe somebody retires and so their job becomes vacant and somebody needs to come into that job. Perhaps through relocation. Maybe someone within the business gets promoted and their job is now vacant, so somebody can come into that vacancy. Maybe somebody is so fed up with their job that they resign and therefore that job has a vacancy. And finally, unfortunately, sometimes this happens that somebody dies while still in a job and therefore that job becomes available, and that's also a vacancy. So, job description and person specification. Pause the video now and try to write down a different definition for both job description and person specification. So, as we've said in the past, a job description simply describes the job. It's no more difficult than that. So, a description of the job might include the job title, what the job involves, who the person who gets the job has to report to, and who they might be responsible for. On the other hand, a person specification tells you the skills, the qualifications, the experience and the personal qualities of the ideal candidate who could come in and get that job. This is split into the essential criteria and the desirable criteria. Essential criteria means that they must have that criteria, whereas the desirable means that they don't have to have that, but it would be looked on more favourably if they did. So it might be essential that you have 5 GCSEs. So if you've got 4 GCSEs, you're not going to get that job. However, it might be desirable that you have waitressing experience. So if you haven't got waitressing experience, you can still apply for that job, but because it's desirable, if you have that experience, then it will be looked upon more favourably if you do have that experience. So essential, you must have it. Desirable, you don't have to have it, but it would be better if you did. So as a recap, the job description simply describes the job, nothing to do with the person, just describes the job, and the person specification tells you the ideal candidate, that if they walk through that door now, what would they have in terms of skills, qualifications, experience and personal qualities. So there's 2 different methods of recruitment. There's internal and the external ones. Now remember that in any walk of life, not just in business, internal means inside and external means outside. So internal recruitment means filling the position with somebody who already works for the business. For example, promoting somebody. So if I was to get promoted and I was to get the head teacher's job, then that would be internal recruitment. I already work for the business, I already work for the school, so that's internal recruitment. I'm becoming promoted. External recruitment means filling that position with somebody who doesn't already work for you and already doesn't work for the business. That's looking outside of your business and trying to recruit, trying to fill that vacancy with somebody else who doesn't already work for you. Both types of recruitment have their advantages and their disadvantages. Again, this is the perfect opportunity for the exam board to throw in one of those 9-mark questions and to get you to balance up the advantages and the disadvantages of internal recruitment and the advantages and disadvantages of external recruitment. So here's the advantages and the disadvantages of internal recruitment and external recruitment. First of all, we'll look at internal. So somebody who already works for you being promoted into another job. So the advantages are that the vacancy can be filled very quickly. First of all, you might take in their CV or their application form. You might consider the 2 or 3 people that have applied for it who already work for you. You could interview them whilst they're at work, and maybe in 2 or 3 days' time they could be doing the job. Very quick. It could also be much cheaper to recruit internally. Simply, the job is put on an internal notice board, maybe in the staff room. Somebody sees it and applies for it. How much is that going to cost? Maybe 2p for the paper and the printer ink. That's it. Doesn't cost any more than that. Disadvantages are there's a narrower choice of candidates available. You might only have 10 people who work for you at the moment. So that's quite a small amount of people if they all want to apply for it. Maybe only one person wants to apply for it. So there's a very narrow choice of candidates available. And no new ideas will be brought into the business. If those people already work for you, then maybe the only ideas that they have are ideas that the business does already. So there's no new fresh blood comes into the business if you're going to internally recruit. Advantages and disadvantages of external recruitment. Well, first of all, the advantages of looking outside of your business is that there's a wider choice of candidate available. You've got thousands of people who might want that job, and so that you could have a huge choice of candidates available. And with those new candidates comes new ideas and what we call fresh eyes. Somebody who will look at the challenge fresh, maybe bring in those new ideas into a business that really needs them. The disadvantages of external recruitment is that it's more expensive to recruit this way than it would be to recruit internally. For example, you might have to put an advert in a local newspaper, and that could be expensive. It might be expensive to put it on a jobs website, so it's going to cost a lot more. And the recruitment process takes a lot longer if you're going to externally recruit. Let's say it takes a day to write your job and to put it into, or to send it into the newspaper. Maybe the newspaper only prints their jobs once a week on a Thursday, and it's a Friday now, so it's going to take until next Thursday to print that in the newspaper. Then maybe it takes a week to get everybody's job applications in. It could be 3-4 weeks before you get somebody into the vacancy. So it's a lot longer process to externally recruit. So as you can see, the advantages of internal recruitment are quite often the disadvantages of external recruitment, and the external advantages are the disadvantages in the internal. So if you know them, then it should be very easy to balance the argument of advantages and disadvantages. So where to advertise the job, we've already said that there's internal recruitment, like pinning up that job advert on a notice board, or maybe the intranet. The intranet is very different to the internet. The intranet is something that you can only access within your business. The business, it's like a notice board. You can put the job adverts on there on your computer, but only people who work for your business can actually see your business's intranet. External recruitment, well, you could put the job advert in job centres, you could put it onto the internet, you could put it into recruitment agencies, which we've talked about before. You might put it into local newspapers. It's very important to put local newspapers in there, because in an exam usually the business that you're talking about is a local business. So make sure that if you're writing that as an answer to external recruitment in your exam, that you use the word local newspapers, and maybe trade magazines. So there's magazines for different trades. So the business, for example, building trade, they will have a magazine where they put building jobs. In the teaching trade, there is a teaching magazine where teaching jobs appears. So trade magazines are specifically aimed at people in that trade, and that would be a good place to put in a job advert for a certain trade. So now we're going to look at application forms and CVs, and these two are two different ways of applying for a job. So it says an application form is designed by the business and completed by the applicant. So if you own a business and there's a job vacancy in your business, you design this application form and then you might put it on the internet and somebody can fill it in if they want that job. It gives the business the information that they want and nothing else. So if you want to know the name of the person who's applying, then you'll put forename and surname on the application form that you're designing. You don't necessarily want to know how many pets they've got, so you're not going to put that on the application form. It says this makes it easier for them to be compared. So if you get in 100 application forms, you know all the information on the application forms is the information that you've asked for. On the other hand, a CV is a summary of the applicant's personal details, skills, qualifications, experience and interest. Although there is a common way to set out a CV, the applicant can include as much or as little information as they want, and this makes it much harder for the business to compare. Sometimes some of the information on the CV won't be information that the business wants, so there's nothing to stop you from writing down how many cats, how many dogs you've got on your CV. This isn't necessarily helpful to a business at all, and therefore a business won't want that. So application forms are designed by a business and then completed by the applicant, and it's information that the business wants. You've already written a CV before, I think in year 10, and maybe you'll use it in year 11, maybe when you leave school as well, when you're applying for jobs, and this is something where you decide what information is going to go into it. Okay, so it makes it much harder for a business to compare your CV with your friends, because it might have a different layout, you might have included different information in there. So shortlisting is the next part of the process. So once all of the applications or all of the CVs have been taken in and the applications are matched to the person's specification, the essential criteria and the desirable criteria, so we've sorted out all those people who have got the qualifications that we've asked for, which are essential. We've sorted out all those people who've got some of the desirable criteria that we've asked for. Then we start to look at shortlisting. Now if 100 people or hundreds of people apply for a vacancy where only 6 or 8 can be interviewed, then we're going to have to knock those people, those hundreds of people, down to just those 6 or 8. That process is called shortlisting. It makes sense, it's just writing a short list of people who are going to be asked to interview. So taking it from hundreds of people down to 6 to 8 people ready to interview those, making a short list. So that is the process of shortlisting, taking the applications, matching them to the person's specification and taking those hundreds of people down to 6 to 8 people on a short list. And then you come to interviews. So those people who are on the short list, those 6 to 8 people, will be invited along to interview. So interviews are held to help a business decide who to give the job to. Their main purpose of an interview are to assess in the shortest possible time 4 things: the applicant's ability to do the job, their personal qualities, their general character and personality, will they fit into the business, and their appearance. These are all things that you can't just get out of either reading somebody's CV or somebody's application form. Interviewing them, seeing them face to face, being able to talk to them should hopefully pick out the best person for the job. So after you've been through the whole process of having the job vacancy and putting out the job advert, deciding whether to internally or externally recruit and internally and externally advertise, collecting in all of your application forms and your CVs, and then going through the process of shortlisting and interviewing, when you've decided which person is going to take the job, it's then time to draw up a contract of employment. It says when a new employee starts work, they will receive a legal written document called a contract of employment. And this is an agreement between an employer and an employee about the terms and conditions of work. It should contain the following: the job title and the position, the place of work, the hours of work, and the salary or the wage. This contract of employment is there to protect both the employer and the employee. If your job isn't to clean the toilets, but I was your employer and I asked you to clean the toilets, you could look at your contract of employment and say, I'm not doing that because it isn't in my job description. This is my contract of employment. I haven't signed to say that I'm doing that. Equally, if I ask you to clean the toilets and it is in your job description and you refuse, then I can go to your contract of employment and look down that and say, look, this is what you've signed to say that that is what you're going to do, and if you don't do it, then I'm going to have to let you go and you're going to get the sack. So it's there to protect both the employer and the employee. So there's different types of contract we've covered before, and it's important not to get these mixed up. So these are the different types of contract. First of all, a full-time contract. These are for employees who normally work around about 37.5 hours or 5 days a week. On the other hand, you might have a part-time contract, and those are for employees who work a portion of the week, maybe 20 hours, maybe 15 hours, just a part of that week. So that's a part-time contract. Now you might have a permanent contract. This means that it continues until you choose to leave that job or you retire. On the other hand, you might have a temporary contract, and this might be for a fixed period of time. So for example, in the past, maybe one of your female teachers have had a baby and therefore they've gone off on maternity leave for maybe 3 or 4 months, and you've had a new teacher come in who's been with you for those 3 or 4 months, and then once that's finished, they've left and your teacher has come back. Possibly that previous teacher who's been covering has been on a temporary contract, so they've been filling in for the teacher on maternity leave for maybe 3 or 4 months, so they've been on a temporary contract. It's important to understand that you can have a full-time contract and a temporary contract. So it might be that you work 5 days a week but your contract is only for 2 months. That's a full-time temporary contract. You might also have a full-time permanent contract. So you might work 5 days a week until you decide you want to leave or retire. You might have a part-time contract, which means that you only work maybe 2 days a week permanently until you decide to leave. Or it might be that you have a part-time contract temporarily, so you work 2 days a week and that's only going to be like that for 3 months. So that's a part-time temporary contract. So don't get mixed up. You don't have one of these, okay, but you are either full-time or part-time, and you have either a permanent contract or a temporary contract. The last one is a 0 hours contract. Now this is much more modern and it allows employers to hire staff with no guarantee of work. So you might be hired on a 0 hour contract and actually you might work once for a business, or you might work quite a lot for a business. Employees only work when they're needed, and these have been in the news recently because lots of places now, like warehouses, they are taking on staff with 0 hours contracts.